The hum of the aeroplane filled the cabin like a lullaby stitched from engines and endless sky. It wasn't the soft hum of peace, but the heavy vibrating rhythm of something relentless, something that seeped into bones and made eyelids surrender. I hadn't slept properly in 2 days. The night shift at the diner had blurred into the morning cleaning job, and both blurred into the ache that lived permanently in my body. Every muscle begged for rest, but life never gave me that luxury. I was Naomi Carter, daughter of nobody forgotten by everybody, a woman who lived in the shadows of a city that didn't know my name. When I stumbled through JFK Airport and found my gate, exhaustion had already won. The seat felt narrower than any coffin, the air sharper than bleach. I clutched my old fraying backpack against my chest, as if it carried my soul inside its seams. My eyes burned, not just from fatigue, but from the truth. I was invisible here, to the men in suits with sleek briefcases, to the families juggling restless children, to the couples kissing as if they owned the sky. No one saw the poor black girl flying alone across the country. No one cared, except him. At first, I noticed him in fragments like flashes of light slicing through dark glass. The crisp cut of a tailored suit, charcoal expensive cut, close to a body built by discipline rather than chance. A wristwatch that gleamed as if time itself bowed to him. The faint curl of cologne cedarwood smoke, something dangerous yet magnetic, that slipped through the air and invaded my senses. And his presence. He didn't belong in the coach. That much was obvious. Power clung to him like a second skin. I told myself not to stare. Men like him didn't notice girls like me. Men like him were carved from stone and privilege forged to rule worlds I would never enter. And yet when he turned his head, his gaze fell on me, direct, steady, and assessing. Dark eyes gray-flecked like steel, tempered in fire. My stomach twisted. There was nothing casual in the way he looked at me. It wasn't the glance of a man noticing a woman. It was deeper, sharper, as if he recognized something buried inside me that I didn't know myself. I pressed my forehead to the cold aeroplane window, trying to disappear into the dark clouds. The engines roared louder, the cabin dimmed, and fatigue pressed me down harder than gravity. I fought to stay awake, but exhaustion betrayed me. And then I felt it. Warmth. My head had tipped sideways, and instead of finding the hard edge of a plastic armrest, it rested against something solid, something alive. A shoulder. His shoulder. The realization sliced through my fog of sleep. My breath caught. Heat rushed into my cheeks, burning hotter than shame. I jerked upright, heart pounding, but his arm shifted subtle, deliberate, as though he allowed me there, as though I belonged there. My pulse beat so fast it hurt. I dared a glance upward. His face was calm, unreadable. Eyes closed, lashes low, mouth set in a line too controlled to be truly at rest. He wasn't sleeping. I knew it. I could feel the tension humming beneath his stillness, the restraint of a predator pretending to slumber. He let me stay. Why, I told myself to move away and reclaim the fragile space thread that separated strangers. But my body betrayed me again. Exhaustion dragged me closer, leaning into his heat and surrendering to the rare, impossible feeling of being sheltered. For once, just for a second, I felt safe. I never noticed the man in the row behind us slip a discreet envelope into his hand. I didn't see the faint nod of acknowledgement, the silent transaction. I didn't hear the click of a hidden camera capturing my face against his shoulder, my vulnerability immortalized. I only slept. And when the plane landed in Los Angeles hours later, all I remembered was the scent of cedarwood, the press of warmth against me, and the way my body, so used to carrying the weight of survival, had leaned into his as if it had known him forever. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his world. And I didn't know that my life had just been rewritten in ink, which was too dark to erase. She slept against me, as though the universe had decided in one fleeting act of mercy to hand me a gift I had already stolen. Her head rested lightly, fragile as glass, yet it anchored me in a way no oath of blood ever had. I didn't move. Not because I couldn't, but because every instinct screamed to. I wanted to claim her, tilt her face up, and mark the truth of what was already inevitable. But I stayed perfectly still, because stillness was power. Naomi Carter. The girl no one was supposed to find. The daughter of a dynasty that was thought erased from history. The heir to a bloodline that could set the world ablaze. And now mine. I studied her features in silence. The curve of her cheek, the shadows of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the lips parted slightly in restless sleep. She believed herself invisible, unwanted, unseen. She had no idea that every rival empire in this country and across oceans would tear the world apart for her. No idea that while she dreamed, my men had already moved. In Las Vegas, a woman who shared her frame and complexion now stood before chapel cameras, a veil hiding every detail that might betray the illusion. The papers were ready, signed days earlier, with her hand though she hadn't known the truth. A harmless waiver at the airport, she thought. A meaningless form. She had signed herself into my life without even realizing it. Witnesses had been bought. Officials bribed. The illusion perfected. By the time she woke, the cage would be complete. She murmured something in her sleep, shifting closer, as though even in dreams she sought warmth. My jaw tightened, and every muscle was a battlefield between discipline and desire. In my world, perception was truth, and perception was power. When Naomi Carter opened her eyes next, she would no longer be free. I first felt the weight of velvet curtains shutting out the morning sun. For a moment, my body ached with disorientation. This wasn't the cheap bed at the motel, where I sometimes worked cleaning rooms. These weren't sheets washed in detergent that smelled like bleach. The sheets beneath me were silk. The room smelled faintly of smoked cedar and money. I sat up sharply, heart racing. This wasn't my room. This wasn't even a place I could afford to dream of walking past. Marble floors gleamed like water. A chandelier glittered overhead, spilling light across gold-veined walls. On the table waited a chilled bottle of champagne, 2 glasses set like a taunt. Las Vegas. I remembered the flight, the stranger, the warmth of his shoulder. And then I saw it. A folder on the bedside table stamped with my name. Hands trembling, I opened it. Photographs spilled out me in a white dress, a veil covering most of my face, standing at an altar beside the stranger. Beside him, my throat closed, heartbeat deafening. It wasn't possible. I had no memory of this. None. But the images were too authentic, too perfect. My signature is inked on a certificate. My handwriting, but not. Twisted. Forged. No, I whispered, dropping the papers as if they were burning coals. This isn't real. It can't be real. The door opened. He walked in, as if he owned the room and the air I breathed. Dark suit, eyes sharper than knives. Presence fills every corner like a storm that bends walls to its will. Alexander Cross, my stranger, my husband. You're awake, he said smoothly, as though I'd overslept a dinner date. His voice was low, rich, and dangerous. I'd like to know if I'd have to kiss you awake. My knees trembled, my breath caught. The world tilted into something I couldn't escape. And that is only the beginning. This is part 1 of Naomi and Alexander's story, where exhaustion meets fate at 30,000 feet, and a girl who thought she was invisible wakes up chained to a man the world fears and worships. If this glimpse of their world gripped you, if you felt the pull of danger and desire in the air, I would love to hear your thoughts. Your comments, likes, even a simple, "I'm here." Let me know you're with me on this journey. It's free to subscribe, so you won't miss the next chapter, as Naomi and Alexander's dangerous dance unfolds. Believe me, the fire is only beginning to burn, so if you're ready for more, stay close. Their story is far from over. The first sound I heard was silence, not the comforting kind, the silence of night's lull between crickets and sighing trees. No, this heavy silence, weighted and deliberate, pressed against your skin and whispered that nothing outside these walls belonged to you anymore. I opened my eyes to velvet curtains drowning the daylight, their folds swallowing the window. My chest ached, as if I had been dropped into a life that wasn't mine and left there like a trespasser. I sat up sharply, my body protesting with every movement. This was not my bed. The mattress beneath me was too soft, too indulgent. The sheets clung to my skin, with the faint perfume of smoke and cedar hymn. Everything about this place smelled of him. Gold-veined marble gleamed on the walls. A chandelier shimmered overhead, scattering fragments of false starlight. At the far end of the room, a table waited with champagne on ice, two flutes positioned as if the celebration had already begun without my consent. My breath caught. My stomach lurched. Las Vegas. Fragments of memory flashed through my mind. The flight exhaustion, the stranger's shoulder, the warmth, the illusion of safety. And then I saw it. A folder rested neatly on the bedside table, my name stamped across the top in heavy ink. I reached for it with trembling fingers. The paper was crisp and expensive. When I opened it, photographs spilled out like a deck of cards meant to play with fate. My throat closed. My pulse thudded in my ears. I was in them, dressed in white with a veil covering most of my face. Standing at an altar beside him, the man from the plane, the stranger whose shoulder had become my undoing. Alexander Cross. My lips shaped the name, though I hadn't spoken it aloud. The images were perfect damning. Witnesses applauding in the background, signatures scrawled in black ink. My name twisted into loops and curves that felt familiar and wrong. No. The word left me in a whisper, fragile as glass. No, this isn't real. I pushed the papers away, as though they burned, shoving them across the table until they fluttered to the floor. The door opened. He walked in like a storm in a tailored suit, measured steps, unhurried confidence, and the weight of someone who owned the air you breathed. The same sharp suit, the same eyes that had pinned me silent in the coach. The stranger, my husband. "You're awake," Alexander said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, rich and low. "I'd like to know if I need to kiss you to bring you back to me." The way he said "back to me" made my stomach twist. I stumbled from the bed, clutching the sheet around me like armor. My throat ached with the force of words that refused to shape themselves. "What is this?" "These photos. They're fake. I never stood in that chapel. I never said vows. I never signed anything." He didn't answer right away. He crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, as though he measured the effect of his nearness. He didn't touch me yet, but the gravity of his presence pulled me taut and wound me too tightly. "You slept," he said, at last, his voice steady, unyielding. "But you signed days ago a harmless form. You thought my men were airport staff. You thought it was nothing. You gave your signature freely." My heart dropped. That document. The waiver. My hands shook as I remembered the hurried scrawl, the relief of being waved through security faster. "No," I whispered. "That was nothing. That was—" That he interrupted, holding up the folder he had retrieved, was everything. He tapped the certificate with 2 fingers. His hands were elegant, long-fingered, dangerous. On paper, "Naomi Carter, you are mine." The word "mine" landed like shackles. I shook my head violently, fury sparking through the fog of fear. "You tricked me. This is fraud. It means nothing." He tilted his head, studying me with unnerving calm, as though my panic amused him. "In your world, perhaps," he said, "but in mine, perception is truth. Every ally, every rival, every shadow that matters now believes we are bound. And that is what matters." Tears stung my eyes, unwanted traitorous. I hated that he saw them, hated the flicker of triumph that lit his gaze, when my anger cracked into vulnerability. "You can't keep me here." I spat, my voice shaking with fury. "I'll go to the police. I'll tell them what you did." The corner of his mouth curved not into a smile, but into something sharper, darker. "And tell them what?" he asked softly. "That you fell asleep on a plane and woke up married. Do you regret the choice your own signature confirms? You'll look unhinged, naive. No one will believe you. No one will save you." My knees weakened. I hated him more for the truth in his words than for the lies. He stepped closer, slow, unhurried, until he was only inches away. His cologne filled my lungs, cedarwood, and smoke wrapping around me like a net. His hand rose, fingers grazing my chin, tilting my face until my eyes met his. "You belong to me now," Alexander murmured, voice velvet wrapped in steel. "The sooner you accept it, the easier it will be." I jerked free, my heart hammering against my ribs, fury spilling through every vein. "I will never belong to you." He let me go, stepping back with the ease of a man who had already played this game 1,000 times. Yet his gaze lingered, heavy fire smoldering in the depths of his eyes. "We'll see," he said softly. Naomi's fury was a living thing, raw and unpolished, sparking against the steel of my will. She stood trembling in the middle of my suite, clutching a sheet, as though it could protect her from me. Fragile, breakable, and yet she did not break. My perfect contradiction. I poured myself a glass of scotch, ignoring the tremor in her voice, as she hurled accusations that no longer mattered. Everything had already been arranged, signed, sealed, bound. "None of this is real," she spat, pacing the room like a caged animal. I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, then lifted it to my lips. "Reality," I said calmly, "is perception, and perception is power. In my world, that makes it real." Her glare was a blade. "I'll expose you. Someone will believe me." I let the silence stretch before answering. Every witness was chosen, every photograph captured, every signature matched. To them, you are Mrs. Cross. You belong to me not because of ink or ritual, but because I decided it. She froze. The sheet was clutched in her fists. Her silence was sharper than her fury. I crossed the room slowly, letting my shadow stretch over hers until she had nowhere to retreat. My hand brushed the wall beside her cheek, caging her without touching her. Her breath quickened, uneven. "You tricked me," she whispered, voice breaking. My lips lowered near her ear, my voice rough and quiet. "No. Right. I had every right. You carry a name you don't even know, a bloodline that could topple empires. Would my rivals have offered you a choice? They would have used you like a pawn, discarded you when it suited them. I at least protect what I claim." Her eyes widened. Confusion flickered across her face. She didn't yet understand the name I had spoken, but she would. The room tilted around me. I clutched the sheet tighter, my chest rising and falling in ragged defiance. "I'm not yours," I hissed, though my voice betrayed me trembling against the heat of his nearness. He smirked faintly, as though my denial only amused him. "Say what you like. Deny it as much as you want. But on that plane you leaned into me before knowing my name. Your body spoke truths your lips refused to admit." Anger surged hot and blinding. I shoved against his chest, breaking the invisible cage. He let me go easily, as though he wanted to watch me stumble backward, arms wrapped around myself, eyes wide with fury and fear. Hatred, fear, and something else I didn't dare name. He downed the rest of his scotch and set the glass aside with deliberate calm. "Tomorrow," he said, "we leave for Miami. There you'll see the world that already considers you mine. And when you do, you'll understand. Your resistance changes nothing." My breath caught. The floor felt like quicksand beneath me. "I'll never forgive you," I whispered. His gaze held steady, merciless though for a fleeting second. Something restless flickered in his eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Naomi. I'm asking for your surrender." His words lingered long after he left the room, closing the door behind him. And I knew, with a shiver that cut deeper than fear, that the bars of my cage were not steel. They were lies, power, and the terrifying truth that no one in this world would believe me. The flight to Miami passed silently, though silence was the wrong word. Silence should have been empty. This silence was complete, crowded with unsaid words, unshed fury, and the steady, unnerving presence of Alexander Cross. I sat across from him in the private jet he commanded, as if it were simply an extension of himself. His black-suited and armed men occupied the perimeter like shadows sculpted into flesh. They said nothing, eyes always forward, as if their existence depended on erasing the line between humanity and obedience. I folded my arms, determined not to look at him. But it was impossible to ignore Alexander. Even when he said nothing, his presence was a storm pressing against every inch of me. He worked as though I wasn't there. Papers spread across the mahogany table. Phone calls issued in clipped, decisive tones, instructions in languages that slid over my ears too quickly to decipher. And yet I felt him watching me in the quiet spaces between. Each glance was like a brand against my skin, though he never allowed me to catch him at it. I wanted to scream. I tried to demand he return me to the life he had stolen. But what life was that, honestly? Nights spent in fluorescent diner lights, mornings scrubbing tiles in buildings where no one knew my name. He had taken my freedom, but had he taken more than I possessed? That thought alone was dangerous. I shoved it down, gripping the armrest until my knuckles whitened. The descent into Miami revealed a coastline that shimmered beneath the setting sun waves, catching fire as they reached for the shore. For one breathless moment, I forgot to hate him. Beauty had always done that to me, stolen the armor of my anger, left me unguarded. The illusion shattered when the plane landed. A convoy of black cars waited at the tarmac. Men in suits moved like shadows around Alexander's slightly bowing heads, as if gravity bent for him. Not a single eye lingered on me, and yet I felt their awareness all the same. I was escorted into the back seat of a sleek black sedan. Leather and silence pressed in around me as Alexander slid in beside me. No one spoke. The city blurred past the tinted windows, neon lights, palm trees, bent by ocean winds, the pulse of nightlife just beginning to thrum. Miami had always been a city of contradictions, glitter against grit, paradise beside peril. Somehow it suited him. The farther we drove, the more the city receded until only the ocean remained, stretching endlessly and black. And then I saw it. The Cross estate rose like a fortress, carved from white stone, and shadow, perched on the sea's edge, as if it dared the waves to breach its gates. Iron and gold gates opened soundlessly, revealing manicured gardens, lit by subtle lanterns, fountains spilling silver into marble basins. It might have been paradise without the guards stationed at every corner, rifles gleaming beneath the floodlights. This was not a home. It was a citadel. My chest tightened as the car climbed the winding driveway. Every inch of it screamed wealth, power, control. But beneath the grandeur, I recognized the truth. This was a cage. The car stopped at the front steps. Columns rose into the night ivy, climbing their flanks, as if even nature had been forced into elegance. Doors taller than most houses opened as we approached. The staff lined the entryway, heads bowed, eyes lowered. They bowed to him. When their gazes brushed mine, I saw curiosity, pity, and something else, fear. Alexander guided me forward with the lightest pressure at my back, his touch barely there yet. It seared me all the same. He said, "This is your home now," his voice smooth as velvet, rich with finality. "A gilded cage is still a cage," I whispered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. His mouth curved faintly, though his eyes stayed cold. Better gilded than buried. He showed me a room more magnificent than anything I could have imagined. Velvet drapes spilled to the floor. Carved oak furniture gleamed beneath crystal light, and a balcony overlooked the moonlit gardens. Dresses hung in the closet, my size shoes lined in rows. Jewelry glittered in drawers that had been prepared as if he had known me all my life. The sight made bile rise in my throat. He had planned everything down to the smallest detail. "You studied me," I accused, my voice shaking. "You calculated me. You erased me." Alexander stood in the doorway, his face unreadable, his hands buried casually in his pockets. "I secured you," he corrected. "There's a difference." And then he left the door, closing behind him, with the soft finality of a lock, though no key turned. For a long moment, I stood frozen. The silence of the room was unbearable. I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, burying my face in my hands. Tears pressed hot behind my eyes, but I swallowed them back. I would not break. Not for him. Not for anyone. I stumbled toward the balcony, throwing the doors open. The night air, sharp with salt, filled my lungs with something almost like freedom. The stars glittered cold and unreachable. Beyond the gates, the world lived on. I gripped the railing so tightly, the iron bit into my palms. Deep inside, I swore to myself he could drape me in silk, surround me, with riches, call me his wife. But I would never give him what he wanted. And yet, a memory betrayed me. The warmth of his shoulder on that plane, the way I had leaned into him without knowing his name, the safety I had felt for one reckless second. A shiver slipped down my spine. "I'll find a way out," I whispered into the night. "I have to." But even as I said it, the iron gates of the Cross estate stood silent and unyielding, as if they already knew the truth, that no one escaped once Alexander Cross had decided otherwise. From the balcony across the courtyard, I watched her. Naomi Carter, my wife, my contradiction. She stood framed by moonlight, her dark skin glowing like obsidian carved into something holy, her hair caught by the ocean wind. Even in defiance, she was breathtaking, especially in defiance. She thought herself trapped. She was right, but she hadn't yet realized that cages could become kingdoms, and queens were rarely given the choice of their crowns. The next evening, I was summoned not by request, but by his will. Alexander's men led me down a polished marble corridor, past portraits of men whose eyes followed me with silent judgment. The doors at the end opened to a chamber thick with smoke and secrets. The council chamber. A long mahogany table stretched across the room. Men sat around it, their suits darker than midnight. their eyes sharper than blades. These were not business people. They were wolves dressed as kings, their power built on blood and silence. And every gaze followed me as I entered. I froze at the threshold, every instinct screaming to turn back. But Alexander's hand pressed against the small of my back, guiding me forward with a quiet command that left no room for refusal. "This is my wife," he said, his voice steady as stone. "Naomi Cross." A murmur rippled through the room, surprise slicing through the practiced masks. Some eyes gleamed with suspicion, others with envy, and a few with hunger that made my stomach clench. The name Cross on my tongue felt like ash. One of the older men, his hair silver, leaned back in his chair. Smoke curled from the cigar between his fingers. "Married in Las Vegas. Quick work, Alexander." His tone carried weight, curiosity laced with challenge. Alexander's jaw tightened, but his smile was faint and cold. The best decisions are made quickly before anyone else has the chance to interfere. Another man raised his glass in mock salute. His gaze lingered on me too long, slow and assessing. "A lovely bride," he drawled. "Fragile, though. You'll need to guard her well." The implication made my skin crawl. I wanted to disappear into the floor. Alexander's voice cut the air sharp as a blade. "She is guarded. Anyone who doubts that is welcome to test it." The room fell silent. The man's smirk faded, though his eyes still glimmered with challenge. I felt Alexander's hand slip lower against my spine, warning me without words. Not now. Not here. The council resumed business territories, divided debts, collected wars, whispered. But through it all, I felt their eyes on me, measuring, coveting, and doubting me. And for the first time, I understood. Without Alexander's claim, I wouldn't last a day among men like these. When it ended, I tore my arm from his grip the moment the doors closed behind us. My whisper was sharp enough to cut. "You paraded me in front of them like property." He stopped, turning to me with eyes that burned with controlled fire. "Not property. Proof." His voice dropped low, dangerous. "You are the difference between weakness and dominance in this war, and no one will ever forget whose side you stand on." My chest rose and fell with fury. I wanted to scream that I hadn't chosen any of this, that I hadn't chosen him. But the truth pressed heavier than my anger. Those men had looked at me like prey, and Alexander had been the only thing standing between me and the wolves. I hated him more for it. Because the moment I admitted that even to myself was when I knew my cage's bars had grown sharper. The walls breathed around me. At least that was how it felt. Days blurred into one another inside Alexander Cross's oceanfront fortress. The sun spilled across marble floors each morning, and the sea wind rattled against gilded glass each evening. But the rhythm meant nothing. I could not choose when to leave, where to go, or even what to wear. Closets full of silk gowns hung waiting for me. Drawers brimmed with jewels that had belonged to women before me, or perhaps women who never made it out. Perfume bottles lined the vanity like soldiers in crystal armor. Each detail whispered the same truth he had studied, planned, and dressed me long before I knew his name. And the more the estate wrapped around me, the more it felt alive, watching, waiting. I walked the halls as though navigating a labyrinth. Guards bowed their heads, but watched with sidelong glances, their silence louder than footsteps. Servants moved quickly, avoiding my eyes, as if contact with me might cost them more than their jobs. Everywhere, his presence lingered. Alexander didn't always appear, but I felt him in the walls, in the air, in the way every lock turned and every door opened only when he allowed it. The mansion wasn't just his home, it was him, and I was the bird in the gilded cage. One evening, after another dinner where Alexander spoke more to his lieutenants than to me, I stood on the balcony outside my room. The sea churned below, black and restless, mirroring the storm inside me. I had promised myself I would not break, and yet each day that passed, I felt pieces of myself bending, warping beneath the weight of his control. So I tested the bars. The first attempt was almost laughable. I tried the gates at dawn, slipping past the kitchens, when the staff shifted. The guards didn't even draw their weapons. One shook his head, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. "Orders," he said. "You can walk the grounds, but you don't leave them." I burned with humiliation, storming back inside, as his laughter followed me. The second attempt was bolder. I found a side corridor leading past shuttered rooms toward a service exit. My heart thundered as my hand closed over the latch. But when the door opened, he was there. Alexander stood in the threshold as though he had been waiting all along, going somewhere. He asked, his voice calm, his eyes sharper than any blade. I froze, breath catching in my chest. Air. I lied. I needed air. His gaze swept over me, slow and deliberate. For a moment I thought he might strike me down with words alone. Instead, he stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face with deceptive gentleness. "You'll find," he murmured, "that there's nowhere safer than where you already stand." I shoved his hand away, fury blazing in my chest. "You don't own me." His smile was faint, dangerous. "You'll learn, Naomi. There are worse fates than belonging to me." She hated me. It was in her eyes, her words, the sharp defiance of her every step. And yet, hate was better than indifference. Hate was alive. Hate could be molded, directed, transformed into something far more consuming. Naomi Carter thought she wanted freedom. She felt the world outside my gates would grant her air choice and life. She had no idea that freedom was the cruelest lie of all. The wolves were waiting. Men like Mateo Delgado would use her bloodline as a weapon, tear her apart piece by piece, then discard her body as though she had never mattered. They would paint the streets of New Orleans with her screams to watch me bleed. I would never allow it. So yes, I had trapped her. Better gilded than buried. Better caged than devoured. She didn't understand it yet, but she would. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the length of my room, each step echoing in the silence, until I thought the sound alone would shatter me. I stared at the unopened champagne bottle still waiting on the table, mocking me. I hated him. I hated the way his voice slipped into my veins like smoke. I hated how his eyes burned through me, sharp enough to peel back the lies I told myself. Most of all, I hated the traitorous flutter in my chest whenever his hand brushed mine, whenever his shadow stretched over me like a shield. Hatred wasn't supposed to feel like this. When I closed my eyes, I saw the plain, the warmth of his shoulder, the steadiness of him when the world tilted around me. I remembered how my body had leaned into his, as if it had known him forever. I pressed my palms to my eyes, furious at the memory. I would not bend. I would not belong. But the cage was tightening, and I feared the moment would come when I couldn't tell where my defiance ended and his hold began. The invitation arrived days later. Or perhaps it was a summons. Nothing in Alexander's world was truly optional. That evening, he entered my room without knocking. He carried a gown across his arm, black silk that shimmered like water. "Wear this," he said. I didn't move. "And if I refuse?" He studied me, eyes unreadable. "Then you walk beside me and nothing at all. The choice is yours." My cheeks burned with fury, but I snatched the gown from him, slamming the door behind me as I changed. When I emerged, the gown clung to me like liquid darkness. His gaze slid over me, slow, consuming, but he said nothing. Instead, he offered his arm. I ignored it. He let it fall without protest, though his smirk told me I had only fed his amusement. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and gold-leaf violins singing beneath the hum of conversation. Politicians, business people, and criminals disguised as elegant, mingled like they were no different. Eyes turned as we entered. Whispers followed like smoke. She's the wife, the girl, the one he found. I walked with my chin high, even as my insides coiled tight with dread. And then I saw him. Mateo Delgado. He cut through the crowd with the ease of a man who knew the world bent for his smile. Tall, dark-eyed, his charm was as polished as the knife he carried. His bow to Alexander was shallow perfunctory, but when his gaze slid to me, something sharpened. "Senora Cross," he said smoothly, extending a hand. "You look exquisite this evening. May I?" Before I could answer, Alexander's hand closed over mine, his grip firm enough to bruise. His smile was razor thin. "She doesn't dance," he said. The tension between them thickened like smoke. Delgado's eyes gleamed, but he stepped back, lips curling into a slow smile. "Of course," he murmured. "Perhaps another time." Alexander guided me away, his hand firm at the small of my back. Too firm, possessive. My heart hammered, not just from Delgado's gaze, but from the fire in Alexander's touch. I saw the way Delgado looked at her. Covetous, calculated. It took everything in me not to break his hand for daring to reach for her. Not here, not in front of allies and enemies alike. But later. Later there would be a reckoning. Naomi was mine. Not because of forged papers or whispered vows. Because I had decided it. Because I would protect her even from her own illusions of choice. Delgado could smile and circle like a vulture. But if he so much as breathed in her direction again, I would tear him apart, bone by bone. When the night ended, Alexander led me from the hall. The air between us vibrated with silence, sharp as broken glass. When the doors closed behind us, I spun on him, fury spilling over. "You humiliated me," I hissed. "You dragged me through that room like property, and then you—" He stopped me with a single step forward, his eyes blazing hotter than fire. "I saved you," he growled. "Delgado touched you with his eyes. He dared to imagine you his. They all did, and they needed to see every last of them that you are mine." His voice vibrated against my skin, low and ragged. "I am not yours." I spat, chest heaving. His hand caught the back of my neck, pulling me closer until our foreheads nearly touched. His breath was hot against my lips, his voice a whisper of iron. "No," he said softly, "but you will be." The words should have terrified me, and they did. But worse was how my pulse betrayed me, racing so hard I thought it might tear me apart. That night, I lay awake in my bed trembling from fury, from fear, from something I refused to name. Beyond the walls, the ocean roared against the shore, but inside, another storm threatened to drown me. I hated him. I hated him with every breath. And yet, as I pressed a hand to my chest, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. Hate and desire burned with the same flame, and Alexander Cross had already lit the match. The estate never slept. Even at night, guards paced the halls, their radios whispering in coded static, their footsteps synchronized, like the heartbeat of a beast that belonged to Alexander Cross. Cameras blinked in the corners, red dots that never closed their eyes. The sea seemed to conspire against me, hurling waves against the cliffs, as if to remind me there is no way out. And yet I tried. I had memorized the patterns. Guards rotated shifts every 2 hours. Their breaks overlapped by minutes, sometimes seconds. Doors that looked locked weren't always. Windows that faced the gardens weren't always watched. That night I waited until silence pressed deepest, the hour between midnight and dawn, when even shadows seemed to rest. My heart hammered in my chest as I slipped from my room, the silk robe around me like armor I hadn't chosen. The corridors stretched endlessly, but I moved quickly. breath shallow, every step a prayer. When I reached the side entrance, I nearly cried from relief. My fingers shook as they fumbled with the latch. The night air rushed in sharp and damp, carrying the ocean's salt. Freedom. And then leaving so soon. The voice cut through the dark velvet laced with mockery. I froze. Mateo Delgado stepped from the shadows, his suit jacket undone, his tie loosened, as if he had been waiting all night for this. Moonlight carved his features into something sharp, dangerous, almost beautiful, in the way fire is gorgeous before it burns you alive. He didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, he looked amused, his smile curling slowly, deliberately. He said, "Alexander's little bird would eventually test her cage. You lasted longer than I expected." I swallowed hard, throat dry. You knew." He tilted his head, eyes glinting. "I know more than you think. I know you don't belong here. I know he forged your vows, stole your freedom, wrapped you in gold so no one else could touch you. And I know how to undo it." Hope flared so sharp it hurt. Undo it. Papers can be destroyed. Witnesses silenced. Freedom bought, he murmured, stepping closer. "If you choose the right buyer." The way he said buyer made my stomach twist. "You don't care about me," I whispered. "You want to hurt him." His smile widened, unashamed. "Does it matter? You want out. I want Alexander ruined. Our goals align." For a flicker of a second, I almost believed him. Almost. But then, I saw it, the hunger in his eyes. Not the dangerous, consuming kind Alexander carried, but something colder. Greed, possession. The desire to use me as a blade to stab his rival. He didn't want me. He wanted what I represented. And I realized with a sickness that curled in my gut that if I stepped into his hands, I would only be trading one cage for another. "I'll find my way," I said, forcing steel into my voice, though my body trembled. I stepped back, clutching the doorframe behind me like it could anchor me. His hand shot out, catching my wrist. His grip was velvet over iron, deceptively gentle, but impossible to break. "Please don't be foolish, Naomi," he hissed, his breath warm against my cheek. "Alexander will destroy you. I will at least let you live while I take everything else." Revulsion surged through me. With a violent jerk, I tore free. "I'd rather take my chances with him than be your prize." For the first time, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Then slowly he chuckled, a low, venomous sound that sent chills racing down my spine. "Brave girl," he murmured. "How long does that bravery last?" He stepped back into the shadows, vanishing as swiftly as he had appeared. I stood shaking in the doorway, the night air cold against my skin, my heart pounding loud enough to wake the dead. Freedom wasn't safety. The world outside Alexander's cage had sharper teeth. I heard the latch. My men reported movement near the side entrance, deliberate and quiet, too careful to be a coincidence. Rage surged through me, cold first, then hot. I found her outside her chamber. Minutes later, breathless, eyes wide, as if she had seen a ghost. She froze when she saw me, and in that instant I knew. She had tried to run. Rage carved through me, not at the attempt, but at the thought of her out there, unguarded, vulnerable, within reach of wolves like Delgado. The fury wasn't just possessive. It was primal. I seized her wrist before she could retreat, my grip unyielding. "You tried to leave," I said. Not a question. A verdict. She yanked against me, fire sparking in her eyes. "I will not be your prisoner." I had to try. I dragged her back, pressing her against the cold stone wall. My palm braced beside her head, my body caging hers without touching. close enough to feel the hammer of her heartbeat. "Do you know what would have happened if you'd passed those gates?" I growled. "Delgado. Others are worse than him. They'd tear you apart piece by piece just to hurt me. Is that what you want?" Her voice cracked, eyes burning with tears. "I want my life back. I want to breathe without your shadow suffocating me. I want to be free." Her words sliced deeper than she knew. For a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I saw Delgado's shadow in her defiance, heard his name in her resistance, and my fury returned like fire to dry timber. "You spoke to him," I snarled, every muscle taut. "Did you think I wouldn't know?" Her lips trembled, but her chin lifted proud, even in fear. "Better him than you." The words ignited something feral in me. My hand caught her jaw, tilting her face, forcing her to meet my gaze. "Lies," I hissed. "You can spit them all night, but your body betrays you. Even now." Her breath stuttered, chest rising fast against mine. I leaned closer, so close I could taste the defiance trembling on her lips. "Tell me you don't feel it, Naomi. Tell me your pulse doesn't race when I touch you. Tell me you don't burn with the same fire devouring me." For one long, ragged heartbeat, I thought she would deny it. Then she shoved me fists against my chest, striking not to wound, but to survive the storm inside her. Her cry tore from her throat, half sob, half scream. I caught her wrists, pinning them against the wall, holding her still as I lowered my forehead to hers. My voice was stripped raw. "Hate me. Curse me. But don't you dare give yourself to him. You're mine, Naomi, even if it kills us both." For a long, breathless moment, the world narrowed to her trembling against me, her scent and her tears. And then with effort, sharp as tearing flesh, I released her. "Go ahead and dream of escape," I muttered, voice hoarse, "but you'll never run far enough." I turned before I broke entirely. Behind me, her silence followed, heavy and trembling. I slid to the floor the moment he was gone, my hands pressed to my burning face. Tears spilled hot and fast, furious and unwanted. I hated him. God, I hated him. But beneath the hatred, deeper than the fear, was something I couldn't smother, something I didn't dare name. And worse, Delgado's touch had repulsed me more than Alexander's fury. The realization cut deeper than any blade. Mateo Delgado lit a cigarette from the shadows beyond the gates, his eyes narrowing as he watched the mansion windows flare with light. She had refused him for now. But refusal was only the beginning. He exhaled smoke into the night, lips curling into a smile, sharp enough to bleed. Let Alexander believe his cage was unbreakable. Let Naomi believe her bravery could save her. Soon both would learn, because the war had only just begun. The night split open with glass. I had been pacing my chamber, nerves raw from Alexander's fury earlier, when the balcony doors shattered inward. Shards of crystal scattered across the floor, catching moonlight like cruel stars. Before I could scream, masked men stormed inside. Shadows with knives, wolves with gloves. One lunged forward, his gloved hand clamping over my mouth. I fought, clawing and kicking. My heart was thundering in my chest. "Quiet," he hissed, accented Italian, dripping from the word. "Or we break you before we deliver you." Terror carved through me, white and blinding. My wrists burned as they tied them, rope cutting deep. They dragged me across the balcony into the night. I thrashed my silk gown, tearing as it caught on the railing. My cry was muffled, devoured by the roar of the ocean below. The estate's guards never came. Silence told me the truth. Someone had silenced them already. The van's doors yawned open. They shoved me inside. The engine roared, tires screamed, and the world blurred into a nightmare. The floor was cold steel, my body thrown hard against it with each turn. Rope dug into my wrists until my skin screamed. Why I choked out, though I knew they had no reason to answer. The leader turned, mask pulled low enough to reveal a grin that curled my blood. Your leverage. Caruso will pay dearly to watch Cross crawl. Caruso. The name struck a sharp note, rival family. I wasn't a bride or even a woman at that moment. I was a weapon, a prize, a pawn. The truth stole the last breath from me. For all his lies and chains, Alexander had never let me feel like this meat tossed to wolves. Fear pressed heavier with each mile. They dragged me into an abandoned warehouse near the harbor. The air smelled of rust and gasoline. Shadows dripped from the walls like tar. I was shoved into a chair, ropes cutting tighter. And then the door creaked open. Mateo Delgado stepped inside. He didn't wear a mask. He didn't need to. "Hello, Naomi," he said smoothly, greeting an old friend. "You look frightened." "Don't be. You're safe now." "Safe." My voice cracked, fury laced with terror. "You're with them." He crouched before me, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "I warned you. Alexander doesn't deserve you. With me, you'll have freedom." His hand lifted fingers, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Mock gently. But first he has to bleed." Revulsion tore through me. I jerked my head away, hot tears burning. "You don't care about me. You want to use me." His smile sharpened. "Perhaps. But if you're clever, you can survive this. Align with me, Naomi. Be why he falls. I'll ensure you live to see it." The warehouse seemed to close around me, the ropes digging deeper, my pulse racing. And for the first time, I truly longed for Alexander's shadow, because even in his cage, I hadn't felt like prey. The call came just past midnight. "They have her." One of my guards gasped, voice fractured with panic. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Caruso. Delgado. The world narrowed into fire. I armed myself with a blade and a gun, my men scrambling to follow. But I didn't wait for orders. This wasn't business. This wasn't war. This was personal. Naomi was the only prize worth fighting for. The warehouse loomed against the harbor, its broken windows glowing faintly. Guards smoked outside, laughter cutting through the night. They never saw me coming. The first fell silent beneath my blade, the second, with a bullet through his skull. Efficient. Ruthless. Inside, the stench of rust thickened. Voices echoed down the corridor. And then I saw her. Tied to a chair, wrists raw, tears streaking her face, but eyes defiant, still burning. My wife. My weakness. And Delgado is standing over her. "Last chance." Naomi Delgado murmured, his hand hovering near her cheek. "Choose me, and you live. Defy me, and I'll leave you in pieces for him to find." I moved before he touched her. The gun roared. Caruso men dropped. Chaos erupted. Shouts, gunfire, bodies hitting the ground. Naomi's scream cut through it all. Delgado spun toward me, fury twisting his face. Cross I fired. The bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him back. He cursed, retreating into the shadows as his men dragged him away. Coward. Another time. Tonight was hers. I cut down the last of the Caruso soldiers, blood spraying across the concrete walls, painted with proof of my wrath. When silence fell, broken only by Naomi's ragged breaths, I dropped the gun and crossed to her. Ropes fell away under my knife. The moment her hands were free, she collapsed against me, trembling sobs tearing from her throat. My arms wrapped around her, fierce, desperate. "It's over," I whispered, my voice raw. "You're safe now. I've got you." I thought I would collapse. The moment his arms closed around me, I did not surrender, but from sheer exhaustion and terror. I thought you wouldn't come, I gasped, voice broken. I thought. His hand caught my cheek, forcing me to meet his eyes. Never, he said fiercely. Do you understand me? Never. I would tear this city apart before I let them keep you. His gaze burned raw and unguarded, and I saw the truth he never said. I didn't wait. I couldn't. My lips crashed onto his desperate devouring. For a heartbeat, he stiffened. Then he yielded, consuming me with a fire that devoured rage and fear. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was brutal, alive, survival itself. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. You're insane, I whispered, trembling. His smile was ragged, almost broken. Then I'll die insane, but not without you. And for the first time, I believed him. The ride back to the estate blurred. Guards whispered as Alexander carried me inside, their eyes wide. He didn't let me go until the study doors closed behind us. Setting me down gently, his gaze lingered on my wrists, raw and red from the ropes. His jaw clenched with fury. I should have killed him, he growled, pacing like a caged beast. Matteo, Caruso, every last one of them. I sat stiffly in the chair, exhaustion dragging at me, but the fire inside wouldn't let me rest. You didn't, I whispered, because you wanted me back more than you wanted revenge. His head snapped toward me, eyes burning. Yes, because nothing matters more than you. The words struck deep, cutting past anger, past reason. I wanted to scream, to deny, to push him away. But the truth had already taken root. Why? My voice cracked. Why trap me in this life when I never asked for it? He stopped pacing, silence heavy. Then he stepped closer, mask stripped, voice low and raw. Because you're not just anyone, Naomi. You are blood, power, the last daughter of a dynasty others would kill to control. And I, his voice faltered for the first time, I needed you. The world tilted beneath me. He had known all along. You stole my life, I whispered. I saved it, he answered, eyes fierce. Cruel, yes, but I would rather chain you to me than bury you because of them. I can live with your hatred. I cannot live with your absence. Tears blurred my vision. My chest ached with contradictions that were too heavy to hold. You don't love me, I choked. You love control. You love winning. His eyes flared, and for once no arrogance remained, only truth stripped and broken. No, you're the only thing I've ever feared losing. That is not conquest. That is devotion. I turned away before he could see the war in my eyes, and how much of me already belonged to him despite everything. But deep inside, beneath fury and fear, something undeniable bloomed. Because for the first time I knew this wasn't just his cage. It was ours, and neither of us would leave it unburned. The estate felt different after the abduction. The guards were sharper, more numerous. Every corridor bristled with men in black suits, their eyes scanning shadows that once passed unnoticed. Floodlights blazed across the gardens each night, turning roses into pale ghosts. But the most significant change wasn't in the mansion. It was in him. Alexander Cross moved like a storm, chained in flesh. Every order he gave and every glance he cast toward his men carried the fury of a man who had tasted real fear for the first time. Fear of losing me. And though I wanted to pretend otherwise, a treacherous part carried that truth like a spark I couldn't smother. I couldn't erase the memory of the warehouse. The ropes are biting into my wrists. Delgado's breath against my skin. He had spoken of me as if I were a weapon, a bargaining chip, nothing more. And then Alexander, bursting through the door, gun-blazing fury unchained. For all his lies, for all his cruelty, He had come. He had fought for me. And in the chaos of blood and fire, I had kissed him as though he were my only refuge in the world. The thought haunted me, because perhaps he was. Days passed, but sleep never came easily. One evening, unable to bear the suffocating silence of my chamber, I wandered the mansion's library. The room smelled of leather and dust-lined floor to ceiling, with shelves heavy enough to hold centuries. I trailed my fingers along the spines, searching for a distraction, when one book caught my eye. Not for its title, it had none, but for the crest embossed in gold on its cover. A crest I had seen before. It had been carved into Delgado's ring, etched into the walls of the council chamber, whispered in the conversations I was never meant to hear. The Bondari crest. My breath caught. I pulled the book free. Its weight was almost ceremonial. Inside the pages told the history of an old dynasty. Families who had risen and fallen with blood as their currency. Power measured not in crowns, but in loyalty, bought with fear. And their faded but undeniable was a name. Naomi Carter. My name. Or not mine at all. The daughter of Samuel Bandari, the last scion of a bloodline, thought extinguished. Hidden after a war, erased from records, left to live in obscurity. Left to become me. The world tilted beneath me. I found her in the library, the book open, her fingers trembling against the page. Her eyes lifted, wild, sharp with betrayal. "You knew," she whispered. I didn't answer. Silence was confession enough. "You knew all along who I was. That's why you sat beside me on that plane. That's why you—" Her voice broke. "That's why you stole everything." I stepped closer slowly, as though approaching a wounded animal. "Yes," I said at last. My voice was low, stripped of pretense. I knew. Her breath hitched, fury flashing across her face. "You used me," she spat. "I protected you," I corrected. "Do you think Delgado would have shown you mercy if he'd found you first? Or Caruso? You are not invisible, Naomi. You are powerful, and power is never left unclaimed." Her laugh was broken, bitter. "So you claimed me instead. You caged me so no one else could touch me. Please tell me how that makes you different." I wanted to tell her everything. I hadn't just caged her for strategy. Her presence had burned through me when her head rested against my shoulder on that flight. But the words refused to form, because devotion and obsession were threads too easily mistaken. I closed the book with shaking hands, the sound echoing like a verdict. "So that's it," I whispered. "My life, my freedom, all stolen because of a name I didn't even know was mine." His eyes darkened, because of a name everyone else would kill to claim. The weight of it crushed me. I had thought myself no one, an orphan scraping by, unseen, unwanted. But in this world, I was something far more dangerous. I was blood. And blood meant power. The truth didn't stay in books for long. 3 nights later, Alexander came to my chamber with no warning. His suit was darker than shadow, his expression carved from steel. "Get dressed," he said. I bristled. "For what? The council will gather tonight. You will be there." My stomach dropped. "Why me?" His eyes burned with certainty, "Because they must see you, because they must know you are mine." I wanted to scream, to refuse. But the gown lay out for me, shimmered like a chain, and his men waited outside the door. Choice was an illusion. The council chamber was grander this time, lit by chandeliers that dripped with light. Smoke curled thick in the air. Glasses clinked and men laughed too loudly. And then silence fell as Alexander entered with me at his side. Every gaze turned. Some widened in surprise. Others narrowed with suspicion. A few lingered too long with hunger that made my skin crawl. Alexander's hand pressed against my back, steady, commanding. "This is my wife," he declared, his voice sharp as steel. "Naomi Cross, the last daughter of Bandari blood." Gasps rippled through the room. Murmurs rose like a tide. Bandari, alive. In that moment I understood. I wasn't just his wife. I was his weapon. They watched me, as if I were both salvation and destruction. Their eyes burned, calculating, dissecting. I kept my chin high, though my knees trembled beneath the silk gown. Alexander's hand remained at my back, a wall between me and the wolves. I hated it, and yet I leaned into it just slightly, just enough to survive. Because survival was all I had left. Their whispers were nothing to me. All that mattered was the fire in her eyes, the tremor she tried to hide. She hated me, but she stood beside me. And as long as she did, no man in that room, no rival in that city could touch what was mine. When the gathering ended, when the doors closed, and the men's voices faded into memory, Naomi tore her hand from mine. "You paraded me," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "You made me a prize." I met her gaze, letting the fire in my own show. "No," I said softly. "I made you untouchable." Her lips trembled with words she didn't speak. And as she turned away, I realized I could never say the truth aloud. She was my weapon, my shield, my obsession. But more than that, she was the only thing in this world I could never afford to lose. The echo of footsteps lingered long after the council meeting ended. I could still hear the scrape of chairs, the murmurs that had swelled when Alexander announced my bloodline. Bandari. The name clung to me like a chain, heavy and suffocating. I had walked out of that chamber with my chin high, every movement rehearsed defiance. But when the doors closed behind us, the fury burned hotter than ever. "You paraded me," I hissed, spinning on him the moment we were alone. "You put me on display like a jewel, something to flash in front of your men." His gaze remained steady, but I caught the storm beneath it. "I made you untouchable. Untouchable." My laugh broke sharply, bitterly. Do you think those men looked at me with respect? They looked at me like wolves, staring at a lamb dressed in silk. "You made me prey." His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, and I instinctively stepped back until my shoulders brushed the cold marble wall. "You are not prey," he growled. "Not while you are mine." The word mine wrapped around me like barbed wire. My chest heaved. "That's the problem. I don't want to be yours. I don't want to be anyone's." He braced a hand against the wall beside my head, his body caging me without touching. His voice dropped, low, dangerous. "Want has nothing to do with it. You are Bandari blood. The world will come for you, Delgado Caruso, every family hungry for power. Without me, you are already dead." The truth sliced sharper than his tone, but fury rose to smother it. "So your solution is to kill me slowly with your chains." For a heartbeat, silence stretched thick enough to choke. Then softer than I expected, he said, "Better chained than buried." Her eyes burned dark fire, flickering like stormlight. She hated me. I knew it. But hatred meant she still felt me, and feeling was the only weapon that mattered. Naomi thought I had paraded her like property. She couldn't see I had shielded her from predators far worse than myself. Every man in that chamber had assessed her, calculated her worth. Without my claim, she wouldn't have walked out with her head still on her shoulders. She would learn that in time. But time was a luxury I wasn't sure I had. That night I couldn't breathe in the room he had given me. The silk sheets felt like shackles, the chandelier above like a mocking crown. I threw the curtains open and stepped onto the balcony. The sea stretched black and endless. Somewhere out there was freedom. Somewhere out there, no one knew the name Bhandari. And yet, even as the thought formed, so did the memory of Delgado's grin in the warehouse. His hand brushes too close. His promise of freedom sounded like a noose. My stomach twisted. Freedom in this world was an illusion. Every door opened only into another cage. And I hated that the safest cage was Alexander's. Days later, a banquet was held in the Great Hall. Politicians, business people, and crime lords dressed in velvet and silk filled the room. Laughter chimed, like crystal hiding knives in every syllable. I sat beside Alexander at the head table, silk draped across my shoulders, jewels heavy at my throat. I kept my chin high, but every gaze felt like fire. And then he arrived. Mateo Delgado. He entered easily, like a man who believed the world owed him space. His suit gleamed midnight, his smile smooth as poison. He bowed slightly to Alexander, then turned his gaze to me. "Senora Cross," he said, voice warm, deliberate. "You look radiant this evening." Heat flared in my cheeks, unwanted. Alexander's hand tightened on mine beneath the table. His voice was ice. "Careful, Delgado." But Delgado only smiled wider. "Radiance deserves recognition," he replied smoothly, before taking his seat across from us. Throughout the banquet, Delgado's gaze returned to me, repeatedly lingering too long, daring too boldly. His words with others were light, charming, and calculated, but beneath every syllable was the weight of challenge sharpened for Alexander to hear. I felt caught in the storm between them. Alexander's hand never left mine. His grip was firm, possessive, as if Delgado's eyes brushed me each time he needed to remind us that I belonged to him. The tension thickened until even the music faltered. When the banquet ended, Alexander guided me away, his steps sharp, deliberate. His grip tightened when we entered the shadowed corridor, spinning me to face him. "Do not look at him again," he hissed, his voice low, but burning with fury. I shoved at his chest, rage rising to meet his. "I didn't do anything." He was polite. Polite. His laugh was harsh, broken. "He touched you with his words. He dared to imagine you his. You don't own me." I shouted, my chest heaving. His hand caught the back of my neck, pulling me close until our foreheads nearly touched. His voice dropped rough, ragged. "No, but I will." The words should have terrified me. They did. And yet traitorously my pulse leapt. I hated how much I wanted her. Her defiance burned brighter than any loyalty I had ever bought. Every time she shoved me, every time she spat her fury, she tied herself closer to me. She didn't see it yet. But one day she would. Delgado could grin, whisper, circle like a vulture. But Naomi's fire already belonged to me, and I would burn the world to keep it that way. Later that night, I stood before the mirror in my chamber, still trembling from the storm in the corridor. I stared at the reflection, the silk gown, the jewels, the dark fire still burning in my eyes. Was this me, Naomi Carter, the invisible girl who once scrubbed motel floors? Or Naomi Bhandari, the bloodline that could topple empires I didn't know anymore? But the woman staring back at me was caught in a war where love and hate had the same face. And that face was Alexander's. From the garden's shadows, Delgado lit a cigar, his gaze fixed on the glowing windows of the estate. He had seen the fury in Alexander's eyes, the way his grip on Naomi had tightened each time their gazes met. And he had seen Naomi's trembling, the flicker of something she didn't yet understand. It was enough. He exhaled smoke into the night lips, curling into a smile of sharpened patience. The war wasn't about guns or borders anymore. It was about her, and he would have her, even if it meant tearing Alexander Cross apart piece by piece. In the stillness of midnight, as the waves crashed against the cliffs, I lay awake, the words echoing in my skull. You are mine. You don't own me. Two truths colliding, neither yielding both, carving themselves into my bones. I hated him. I needed him. And somewhere deep inside, I feared that the line between those truths had already begun to blur. The storm never really ended inside the Cross estate. Tension curled like smoke even when the halls were silent, and the sea lay calm against the cliffs. I felt it the way guards stood closer than before, in the weight of Alexander's gaze, whenever I moved too far from him. And yet, for all his power, I felt something else too, cracks in his armor. He was restless. Nights found him pacing his study shadows, stretched long by the firelight, his jaw tight, his glass of whiskey untouched. He thought I didn't notice, but I did. Because he wasn't the only one who couldn't sleep. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I heard it, the faintest scratch against the balcony doors. I froze, heart hammering before I forced myself forward. The curtains billowed as I pushed them aside. And there he was, Mateo Delgado. Moonlight carved him into something sharp and dangerous, his smile smooth as silk. He stood on the other side of the balcony rail, as though the sea had carried him here. "Bonsoir, Señora Cross," he murmured, his voice low, intimate. Or should I say, "Naomi Bandari." My breath caught. He tilted his head, studying me with those dark, amused eyes. "I told you once freedom can be bought. You still wear his chains, don't you?" I gripped the curtain tighter. "You shouldn't be here." "Perhaps," he said with a shrug. "But I'm here for you. Alexander doesn't own you, Naomi. He never will, no matter how loudly he roars it." His words slid like smoke into my lungs, suffocating and intoxicating. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice a whisper. He leaned forward, his grin widening. "I want you to choose. Him or me." I felt it before I saw it. The shift in the air, the faint ripple of something wrong. I had lived too long in shadows not to recognize them. My hand rested on the pistol beneath my jacket when I entered the corridor outside Naomi's chamber, but when I pushed open her door, I found only her standing on the balcony, her shoulders tense, her eyes wide, and the night beyond, empty. Still the scent lingered. Cigarette smoke. Delgado. My rage simmered silently. He had dared to step into my house, but worse, he had dared to step into her silence. When Alexander entered, I almost flinched. His presence filled the room like thunder, his eyes sharper than knives. What did he say? The question cut straight to the bone. No pretense, no patience. I lifted my chin, though my hands trembled at my sides. Nothing. His eyes narrowed. "Please don't lie to me." I forced the words past the knot in my throat. He told me I had a choice. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, and for a moment I thought he might shatter the balcony rail with his bare hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, ragged. "You don't." The truth of it pressed down on me like iron. I should have been furious, and I was. Delgado's insolence deserved blood. But beneath the fury deeper than rage was fear. Fear that she might believe him. Naomi's fire was the only thing that kept me breathing. Without it, without her, everything else, power, empire, blood, meant nothing. I could kill Delgado 1,000 times. But if she chose him, I was already defeated. and that terrified me more than death. After he left, I sank onto the bed, pressing my hands to my face. Delgado's words whispered still. You have a choice. But was it true? With Alexander, choice felt like a chain disguised as safety. With Delgado, it felt like a blade disguised as freedom. Both dangerous, both consuming. And somewhere deep inside, I wondered if my real choice wasn't between them at all, but between survival and surrender. 2 nights later, Alexander announced we would attend a gala. Not the council, not another banquet among his wolves, but something larger, a convergence of allies and enemies alike. The ballroom in Miami's old quarter glittered with chandeliers and gold leaf. Music swelled violins, sharp as knives. Politicians, heiresses, men whose hands were stained with blood, all moved in gowns and tuxedos, as if the world weren't built on bones. I wore crimson silk that clung to me like fire. Alexander's hand rested against the small of my back, guiding me through the throng. Eyes followed us. Whispers rose. And then Delgado appeared. He cut through the crowd with calculated ease, his smile sharp, his bow shallow. Senora Cross. He greeted, his eyes burning into mine. May I? Before Alexander could refuse, I surprised myself. I placed my hand in Delgado's. Gasps rippled through the room. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his jaw taut with fury, but he didn't move. Delgado led me to the floor. The violins swelled. He moved precisely, his hand firm at my waist, his steps confident. I followed, my heart hammering. You see, he murmured as we turned. The world doesn't end when you step away from him. I'm not stepping toward you, I whispered back. His grin widened. Perhaps not yet, but soon. I let the dance last only long enough for every eye to see, for every whisper to spread. Then I moved. The crowd parted instinctively as I crossed the floor. Without a word, I seized Naomi's hand, pulling her free of Delgado's grip, and before the room could breathe, my mouth crashed onto hers. Hard, possessive. Gasps erupted. Whispers sharpened. But all I felt was the fire of her lips beneath mine, the defiance that stiffened her body, until it softened for one breath, one heartbeat into surrender. When I pulled back, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes blazing with hatred and confusion. My thumb brushed her jaw, a silent claim. Then I turned to Delgado. Touch my wife again, I said, voice carrying enough to slice through the music, and you'll dance with bullets, not violins. The silence that followed was electric. Delgado inclined his head, his smile venomous as you wish. The moment we were alone, I shoved him hard, my voice shaking. You humiliated me. No, Alexander said, his eyes still burning. I saved you. From what? A dance. From every man in that room who thinks they can take what's mine. My chest heaved fury, and something else tangled so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. I am not yours. His hand caught my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. His voice dropped low, rough. You are. Not because of papers, not because of blood, because I decided it, because I will protect you even from yourself. The words should have broken me. Instead, they left me trembling, because part of me believed them. That night, Delgado stood at the edge of the ballroom watching as Alexander led me away. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around his smile. She burns, he murmured to himself. She burns for him, but fire spreads. He exhaled, his eyes narrowing with promise. And soon, it will burn them both. Back in the estate, I lay awake remembering Alexander's kiss still searing my lips. I hated him. I hated him more than ever. And yet when I closed my eyes, it wasn't Delgado's words that haunted me. It was Alexander's. "You are mine." And the worst part was, I didn't know if I wanted to prove him wrong anymore. The ocean outside the Cross estate churned restlessly, waves striking the cliffs like fists too furious to be silenced. Inside the mansion was no calmer. Tension coiled between Alexander and me like a living thing, hot, sharp, unavoidable. He had kissed me in front of an entire ballroom, torn me from Delgado's grip with a possessiveness that should have suffocated me. And yet in the privacy of my chamber, when I pressed my fingers to my lips, I could still feel the fire of him. I hated it. I hated that the heat lingered. I hated that a part of me didn't want it to fade. I sat by the window that night, silk robe loose around me, watching the moon paint silver over the ocean. My mind spun in endless circles. Delgado's words, "You have a choice." Alexander's words, "You are mine." Both dangerous, both binding. But when the warehouse had closed around me, when the ropes had cut into my wrists, and Delgado's grin had promised ruin, it hadn't been Delgado who came for me. It had been Alexander. My heart betrayed me every time I remembered. And I wondered if surrender wasn't weakness, if it was the only way to survive. I had faced men with guns pressed to my head, blades at my throat. I had looked into death's eyes and laughed. But nothing unnerved me like Naomi. Every glance from her, every word she threw like a blade carved deeper than any bullet. She hated me, yet she kissed me back. She defied me, yet leaned into my shadow when wolves circled. She didn't understand she was already bound, but I feared something far worse, that I was the one bound to her. 2 nights later, after another day of silence, thick as smoke, I couldn't stand it any longer. I went to her chamber. She stood on the balcony, the sea wind tangling her curls, her robe fluttering like a banner of defiance. She didn't turn when I entered. "You shouldn't come here," she said softly. "Then stop looking at me like you want me to," I answered. Her breath caught, though she didn't move. I stepped closer, every word rough, torn from a place I rarely let anyone see. "I have fought wars, Naomi. I have killed, conquered, and burned entire empires to ash. But nothing terrifies me more than you walking away from me." Finally she turned. Her eyes glistened fire and fury, tangled with something she couldn't name. "You stole my life," she whispered. "I saved it," I countered. "Cruel, yes. Ruthless always. But if I hadn't, you'd already be buried by men who see you as nothing more than a pawn." Tears slid down her cheeks, hot and angry. "And you see me as what, a trophy? A shield?" My chest ached. "No, I see you as mine, my obsession, my undoing. The only thing I cannot afford to lose." Her lips parted, trembling. "You don't know what love is, Alexander." "Then teach me," I said. His words unraveled me. Every vow I had whispered to myself, every promise to resist him, shattered under the weight of that single plea. "Teach me." Before I could think and breathe, I closed the distance. My mouth found his, desperate and trembling, pouring all my fury, all my confusion, all my longing into the kiss. He froze for a heartbeat, then devoured me. His hands framed my face, his body pressing me back against the balcony rail. The kiss burned a war and a surrender all at once. When we finally tore apart, our foreheads rested together, breaths mingling, hearts racing. "I hate you," I whispered. His smile was ragged, broken. "Then hate me forever, as long as you stay." For a fleeting moment, the world felt still, but the storm was never far. Later that night, Alexander's men intercepted a message, a symbol carved into a warehouse door. A black rose dipped in ash. Delgado's mark. He wasn't finished. And this time, he wasn't circling. He was coming straight for us. As I stood in the study staring at the mark drawn on the photographs across the desk, I felt the fury return. Delgado thought Naomi was his path to power. But he had underestimated one thing. Naomi wasn't just my weakness. She was my reason. And I would burn the city salt the earth destroy everything in my path before I let him touch her again. I woke to find Alexander watching me, not with the hunger that usually burned in his gaze, but with something rawer stripped bare. What I whispered. He didn't look away. I'm afraid. The admission cut deeper than any declaration of power. Of what? His jaw tightened. Of losing you. Of failing to keep you safe. I should have laughed and thrown his chains back in his face, but the words sank into me, carving cracks in the walls I had built. Because for the first time, I believed him. The ocean roared outside, restless and wild, but in that moment, inside the gilded cage, another storm raged louder. Love, hate, fear, and desire had blurred into one fire that consumed us both. And as I lay back against his chest, trembling with the truth I hadn't wanted to admit, I realized the war ahead wouldn't just be with Delgado. It would be with myself. Because no matter how many times I whispered I hate you, my heart was already betraying me. If you've made it this far, I'm sure your heart races like Naomi's every time she faces Alexander. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Naomi will choose love or freedom? Don't forget to hit like if you've been captivated by this story, and subscribe, follow the channel to catch the upcoming chapters, where secrets will be revealed, and Delgado will strike with his most dangerous move yet. Every bit of your support is the fuel that keeps me writing these intense and emotional episodes.